IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello, this is Megha Pardhi. I'm a research analyst at China Studies program at Takshashila Institution. In today's episode of All Things Policy, we're discussing Indo-Pacific Strategy released by Biden-Harris administration recently. Indo-Pacific region has a special significance in US's foreign policy strategy, and it is evident from throughout the administration of Obama, Trump, and Biden. So all administrations have their own dedicated strategy toward the region. While Obama administration focused on pivot to Asia and rebalancing, Trump administration had its own strategic framework for Indo-Pacific. Now, recently, on February 11th, the Biden-Harris administration revealed its Indo-Pacific strategy for the US. This strategy focuses on 5 different themes of their vision for Indo-Pacific, and it envisions a region that is free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient. To discuss more on this topic, we have with us today Dr. Shrey Khanna. Shrey is research analyst with Takshila's Indo-Pacific Studies program. Welcome, Shrey.
Thank you, Megha. Good to be here.
So, Shrey, in this document, what is view on China? What is it that US wants to do in Indo-Pacific with respect to China?
When we look at this question, what is that the US is doing in the Indo-Pacific? And if we go to the document is very explicit about this. And it says that intensifying American focus is in part due to the fact that the Indo-Pacific faces mounting challenges, particularly from PRC, People's Republic of China. And then it gives the logic for its strategy when it says that PRC's coercion and aggression spans the globe, but it is most acute in the Indo-Pacific. And then it lists the what China is doing, the economic coercion of Australia, conflict along the line of actual control with India, growing pressure on Taiwan, bullying of its neighbor in East and South China Seas. So it gives that logic that it's the PRC's coercion and that increasingly increased assertiveness which has made this region so important to the US involvement. And it says that we want to pursue, the document says it's clear about it, that it wants to pursue a sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific. China does. And to counter that, US wants to build a greater coalition to realize balance of influence, what it talks about, a balance of influence in the Indo-Pacific, so that China's sphere of influence, the aspirations for regional hegemony, they are not realized. And after saying this, it also, recognizes the limitations that the US has to China. There has been quite a long history of this politics in US, the liberal internationalism, which sought to, change China, that we will change China and will make it democratic or a responsible stakeholder. So this document recognizes that we cannot change China. It is not likely to become a democratic nation or on line with the human rights aspirations of the West. Therefore, the document says that we seek to shape the strategic environment around China by building a balance of influences that advances our future while blunting Beijing's efforts to frustrate US objectives and those of our partners. So the document is at least this clarity on China after decades of debate in the US. There is this bipartisan consensus there that not only China has to be balanced, China's rise has to be contained somewhat, but also that China is not going to change its internal composition or its social political character. And because it is likely to be here, we need to manage that competition responsibly while creating or facilitating a strategic environment in which US, along with its allies and partners, they can, they're in a favorable position as opposed to a time when China realizes its sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific. That's why the document says that a free and open Indo-Pacific can only be achieved if we build collective capacity for new age. It says that common action is now a strategic necessity. So that it is very significant in the sense that, that post 1991, that unipolar world order that US wanted to impose, this talk of developing or building collective capacity or talk of common action with allies and partners, when US realizes it, it shows that they are moving towards a more multipolar world order. They accept that world is going to be multipolar, Indo-Pacific is going to be multipolar region. And that's why it says that we'll deepen our regional treaty alliances with Australia, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, and Thailand, while also strengthening relationships with regional partners like India. So, and lastly, one important thing that is it is doing is it supports that ongoing process of that minilateralism, when it says that we'll also encourage our allies and partners to strengthen their ties with one another. So it is not a US centric Indo-Pacific that they are conceptualizing. They are saying that, if interest is there, then those interest based coalitions should be there in the Indo-Pacific, even if US is not part of it. So that is like a broad basis which US is looking at China in this Indo-Pacific strategy. The talk of refocusing security assistance on the Indo-Pacific, the idea that originally came under President Obama, that we want to rebalance our commitments to Asia away from Europe, and it shows that it wants to build capacities along with its partner in the region.
Okay, so Shreya, in this document, as we can see, India and China and some other countries are also mentioned for quite a lot. I mean, India and China are mentioned at least 19 times. So, what is action plan in the document, and what are the challenges that US will face in its implementation, particularly with regards to India?
So, Megha, this strategy has 5 points, the objective part, and then it moves on to the action plan. It is 10-point action plan. And first and foremost is that the US wants to drive new resources to the Indo-Pacific. It says, and I quote, that we will refocus security assistance on the Indo-Pacific, including to build maritime capacity and maritime domain awareness. Now, if you see, especially after Afghanistan withdrawal, this shows that the process which is started during President Obama, the rebalancing, it is continuing. It has reached its, conclusion that the US wants to focus more on the Indo-Pacific, and the timing, if you see the tensions that are going on between the US and Russia, NATO and Russia. And at that time, US releases this strategy document on Indo-Pacific. It shows that the priority for US is the Indo-Pacific and not the European theater. And in this context, when it says that it wants to drive new resources to the Indo-Pacific, the idea is then to build the shared capacity with its allies and partners. Along with it, it also talks about reinforcing deterrence. So the document says that we will work with Congress to fund the Pacific Deterrence Initiative. And through the AUKUS partnership, we will identify the optimal pathway to deliver nuclear powered submarines to Australian Navy at the achievable date. So in that direction also, much investment is being planned in the Indo-Pacific. Here, it is important to note that Pacific Deterrence Initiative, it is still stuck in Congress. So Pentagon has to move that ahead. The plan that Pentagon had submitted in May last year, it included funding, for example, a destroyer fleet and F-35 upgrades, but it had very little for strengthening alliances and partnership. And this led to bipartisan criticism of Pentagon's plan, that you are only allotting out of 5 billion that they were asking, only $500,000 were for strengthening alliances and partnership. So the idea was to have this Pacific Deterrence Initiative so that all that money that US is spending on its defense and its strategic interests, how are they going to help achieve its objective? And in that context, this criticism was there. And after in December, it was reported that Congress has increased that Pacific Deterrence Initiative, the budget for it, from $5 billion to $7 billion. And so this shows that money is not a problem as far as funding this initiative. but it has to move ahead so that the component where to build capacity of its allies and partners, that is more of a political part than the straightforward military buying, and how that collaboration is going to be. So Pentagon has to move ahead, plan on that, and if it goes ahead, India will be the partner and that strengthening alliances part. Along with that, it wants to see an empowered and unified ASEAN. There is that US ASEAN summit, a special summit, which is planned but to be held in Washington, D.C. Along with it, so far, one of the important missing part of US's Indo-Pacific strategy has been that it lacks that economic framework to sustain its presence or to counter what China is doing. So, in this action plan, it says that we'll come up with an Indo-Pacific economic framework in 2022, early 2022, which will govern digital economy and improve supply chain resiliency, and it will catalyze investment in transparent, high standard infrastructure. So that part is there. How it is going to be built, it is yet to be seen. Then India has got major importance in this document. The document says that we will continue to build a strategic partnership in which US and India work together through regional groupings to promote stability in South Asia. This means that India will continue to get support for its net security provider responsibility from the US, and we can expect growing convergence on Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Maldives. Allied with this is their insistence on delivering on Quad, and much of this convergence that they want to achieve is likely to materialize via Quad. And we are already seeing it happening in Bangladesh. All that episode that happened with Sonadia Deep Seaport project was cancelled, and another project was given to Japan. There was US and India combined pressure on Bangladesh not to give that project to China. So there was Quad convergence there. And even the recent Australian decision to invest in LNG supply chain in Bangladesh, in creation of an LNG supply chain in Bangladesh, this goes hand in hand of India's own decision to make the region an energy hub. In this regard, I think one point where, especially from Indian point of view, where it is likely to be a friction point is that it's the divergence on Myanmar. So the document says that the United States will continue to stand up for democracy in Burma, working closely with allies and partners to press the Burmese military. And now India's own position is not, is allied with that. So there can be a problem with regard to this. Along with this, it wants to expand US, Japan, South Korea cooperation and build resilience in Pacific Islands, etc. So this is the basic action plan that the US is planning for its Indo-Pacific strategy.
That is quite a substantial plan, I must say. So, on this note, we'll take a short break and we'll see you after the break.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Varun talks to Hitesh Dhingra, founder of The Man Company. They take a look at how the male grooming industry has evolved. On The Longest Constitution, Priya explores the states of women's rights with respect to their bodies, contraception, and abortion. On Audio Gyan, Kedar meets user researcher Dharmesh Ba. They talk about the significance that research and insight bring to an organization. On the Musafir Stories, it's all about Hyderabad. Saif and Faiza talk to Yunus Lasania, curator of the Hyderabad History Project and the Beyond Charminar podcast. And on IVM Live, Santriksh and Zalak are joined by the hosts of Big Talk About Tiny Humans, Devi Shobha and Dr. Meghna. They rate Bollywood parent characters in a fun game. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. The word of mouth really helps. Also, don't forget to rate us on whatever platform you're listening to us and check us out on YouTube. You can check a list of all our channels at ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and HDFC Life Insurance. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back. In today's episode, we are discussing Indo-Pacific Strategy released by Biden-Harris administration. To discuss this strategy, we have Dr. Shrey Khanna with us. Shrey is research analyst with Takshila's Indo-Pacific Studies program. So Shrey, Trump era document on Indo-Pacific, which has been declassified now, and in one of those documents, it is mentioned that there was mention of sharing of research and development with like-minded countries so that they can maintain an edge over military. And this was an indirect indication to maintaining an edge over all militaries, including that of China. So, do you think that this document, like, first of all, does this document have similar clause or indications? And if yes, does this mean US and India will see greater cooperation in military in future?
Megha, this document talks about creating new opportunities to link US's defense industrial base, its defense supply chain with its partners and allies, and co-producing key technologies. And when it says so, it says, and I quote, as we do, we will bring together our Indo-Pacific and European partners in novel ways, including through AUKUS partnership, unquote. And rightly, AUKUS is a prime example of this aspect of security cooperation. And the document states that idea is not just to strengthen the US, but also to develop a collective capacity to achieve a favorable balance of influence in the Indo-Pacific. And as far as India is concerned, the security cooperation is likely to move ahead. The document states that we will advance our major defense partnership with India, and it further states that we will collaborate in new domains such as health, space, and cyberspace, and deepen our economic and technology cooperation. So R&D cooperation is likely, but it is much more likely in space and cyberspace rather than on military platforms at this stage, because even if we see AUKUS, it's like an Anglosphere, and there are still many political differences between US and India, and there's a whole history behind it. So at this stage, it is too soon to say whether that sort of cooperation on military platforms will be there, but some sort of R&D cooperation, particularly in cyberspace, it is likely to be there.
Okay, that's good to know. So the document also mentions cooperation with a lot of partners on various range of topics, as you have also mentioned earlier. But it has been observed and also quite evident in last few years that some countries are kind of still hesitant to go totally against India or are still walking a tightrope between US and China. So when US says that they will work with like-minded countries and they'll work with different partners to counter rise of China, how likely is that these all countries in Indo-Pacific will agree to work with US and to counter China's rise?
Right. If you see the press conference which happened with the release of this strategy document, and that senior official, he said that this Indo-Pacific strategy document, it is not a China strategic document, but a strategy for the region to make a free and open, resilient Indo-Pacific. And though opposing China's rise for Southeast Asian nations, it is difficult because of proximity, because of their dependence on the trade. But free and open Indo-Pacific, as the US defines it is in their national interest as well. And if you and these nations in Southeast Asia, they have adopted Indo-Pacific framework in their foreign policy. For example, we have Indonesia, which much before this free and open Indo-Pacific, it came up with its own global maritime fulcrum around 2014, and then it tried to develop into a strategy as well in 2017. Similarly with Vietnam, Philippines, ASEAN itself, it released its ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. So as far as Indo-Pacific, that integrated nature or interconnected nature of Indian and Pacific Ocean is there. That broad framework is there. These countries, they believe in it. They want to work in it to advance that free and open Indo-Pacific. But yes, as you said, as far as countering China's rise, even US is not willing, even though the strategy document starts with this premise that why are we in the Indo-Pacific, as I talked about, it is because partly of what PRC is doing. But even after saying that, it is in press conference, it is saying the department official, he said that this strategy document is not a China-specific strategy document. It is to maintain that balance of influence, to maintain that favorable strategic environment in the Indo-Pacific, in which China's rise and competition with China can be managed rather than firmly containing China's rise.
So I can say that competition in some aspects and cooperation in other is going to be a defining feature in Indo-Pacific.
Yeah, surely, because the even document talks about that the US needs China to solve the problem of climate change, and climate change is one of the important topic in this document. So yeah, as you said, cooperation as well, but competition also.
So, last question for today. What is the key takeaway from the strategy document? What do you think is the key takeaway?
To me, I think the rebalancing that started under President Obama, this document shows that it is culminating into something permanent in the Indo-Pacific. And as I see, I think it's a political strategy aimed towards achieving a favorable balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. It is not an explicit military strategy aimed at the Chinese containment. And if we look at it that way, from that political strategy will flow other aspect of military cooperation. But at this moment, US wants to compete with China to manage that China's rise and that competition. But it is not, it accepts that there are limitations in countering China. So the ability to change China. But they have formulated this political strategy, which is a good start.
That sums it up quite nicely. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you all for listening.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
We face 100 dilemmas every day while raising our children and nurturing our families. Why not let science help us make informed decisions to solve our dilemmas? Hi, I'm Devi Shobha.
And I'm Meghna. We host Big Talk About Tiny Humans, where we will help you unpack challenges around parenting and your child's development.
And more importantly, we will equip you with research-backed strategies that you can readily act on.
Tune in to our podcast every Wednesday on the IVM Podcasts app, website, or your favorite podcast platforms.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.